My brothers and sisters, imagine lying in bed at night, eyes heavy with sleep, but your heart restless with desires, needs, and unspoken prayers. How many of us close our day thinking of worries rather than solutions, of struggles rather than hopes? Now, what if I told you that within the treasures of Allah's names lies a secret key, and reciting it just 21 times before you sleep has the power to shift your reality, to align your wishes with the mercy of the one who owns the heavens and the earth? Suddenly, the night you thought was ordinary becomes the doorway to extraordinary outcomes, and the silence of your room becomes the stage where destinies are rewritten. But here's the catch. Not everyone who utters this name finds their wish fulfilled, because there is a hidden condition, a spiritual code embedded in its remembrance that separates empty words from life-changing transformation. And once you understand this, you will never treat your nights the same again. So tonight, as you prepare to rest, will you dare to unlock this secret, or will you let another night slip away while the doors of fulfillment remain closed? The names of Allah are not mere sounds or words that roll off the tongue without meaning. They are divine attributes, timeless truths, and eternal realities that hold the essence of who our Creator is. And when a believer calls upon these sacred names, they are not simply engaging in an act of speech, but in a deep spiritual connection with the one who owns all power, all mercy, and all authority. And it is through these names that Allah has allowed His servants to know Him, to recognize His greatness, and to find a doorway to every solution, every wish, and every form of success in life. For when one recites the names of Allah, especially with sincerity, understanding, and consistency, they are essentially planting the seeds of transformation in both their hearts and their lives, because each name of Allah corresponds to a unique attribute that governs the universe and our lives within it. And to call upon Ar-Razak is to invite provision. To call upon Al-Ghaffar is to invite forgiveness. To call upon Ash-Shafi is to invite healing. And to call upon Al-Fattah is to invite the opening of closed doors. And in this way, a believer is not just reciting, but actively tapping into divine realities that unlock what is otherwise impossible by human means. For human beings are limited, restricted by time, ability, and resources, but Allah is unlimited, without beginning and without end, and His treasures are never diminished no matter how much He gives. And when a servant repeats a name of Allah with conviction, they are declaring their helplessness while affirming His absolute power. And in that surrender lies the transformation of wishes into reality. Because wishes are not simply desires of the heart, they are often reflections of our needs, fears, and longings. And by turning these into supplications anchored with the names of Allah, we shift them from mere personal cravings into divinely guided aspirations. And this alignment is what transforms an ordinary wish into a prayer that is answered. Because Allah promises in the Quran, "To Allah belong the most beautiful names, so call upon Him by them." And this is a direct command and a guarantee that His names are keys to unlocking solutions. And when used with focus and persistence, they become tools that shape destiny, redirect outcomes, and turn impossibilities into tangible blessings. And every repetition is a reminder that no power can stand against His decree, and no barrier can block His mercy. And thus the believer who holds onto these names before sleep enters a sacred state where their final thoughts and utterances before surrendering to rest are words of divine power. And this in itself shapes the unseen realm. Because angels record these acts, hearts are softened by them, and the unseen blessings they invite are poured into the believer's life in ways they may recognize immediately or in ways that unfold with time. But either way, every uttered name carries a weight in the heavens and a ripple in the earth, ensuring that the servant who calls upon Allah through His names is never abandoned. And the proof of transformation lies in stories throughout Islamic history, where prophets, companions, and righteous servants called upon Allah with His names and saw miracles manifest before their eyes, like Prophet Yunus calling upon Allah in the darkness of the whale with a name that acknowledged His greatness, or Prophet Ayub calling for healing, or Prophet Musa asking for strength. And in all these instances, wishes that seemed unreachable became realities through invoking the names of Allah. And when a believer today repeats a particular name of Allah 21 times before sleep, they are essentially placing their trust in that divine attribute, handing over their wishes to the only one who has the power to fulfill them, while at the same time cleansing their heart of doubt, pride, or reliance on creation. And this purification of intention is what opens the gates of divine help, because it is not the number itself that guarantees results, but the sincerity, focus, and submission that come with it. And the believer who embraces this practice will find that their wishes are not only fulfilled, but fulfilled in ways far greater than they imagined, because Allah responds not just to the words we say, but to the hearts we carry. And when those hearts are aligned with His names, every wish becomes possible, and every reality can change by His will. Nighttime remembrance is unlike any other form of worship because it takes place when the world is silent, when distractions fade, and when the heart is at its most vulnerable state. And in this sacred time, particularly before dawn, the believer connects with Allah in a way that cannot be replicated during the busyness of the day. For it is in the stillness of the night that the soul becomes more attentive, the heart more tender, and the tongue more sincere. And it is in these quiet hours that remembrance transforms from routine utterances into heartfelt calls that ascend directly to the heavens, bringing fulfillment, mercy, and blessings that surpass human imagination. Because Allah Himself descends to the lowest heaven in the last part of the night, calling out to His servants, asking who is seeking forgiveness so He may forgive them, who is asking so He may grant, and who is calling so He may respond. And this divine invitation is a proof that the time before dawn carries unparalleled power, and to engage in remembrance during these hours is to take advantage of a window where divine mercy flows abundantly and doors of fulfillment are wide open. And when a believer utters the names of Allah, recites His praises, or whispers supplications in those moments, it is not just worship, it is planting seeds that bloom into fulfilled wishes, lifted burdens, healed wounds, and blessings that accompany them long after the night ends. And history is filled with examples of the righteous who relied on nighttime remembrance as their secret to success, provision, and protection. For the companions of the Prophet were known for their dedication to Qiyamul Layl and Dhikr before Fajr, and they testified to the barakah that entered their lives because of it. And every believer who sincerely turns to Allah in the night will testify to a lightness in the heart, a clarity in the mind, and a strength in facing the trials of the day. Because divine mercy that descends in those moments is not abstract. It manifests in solutions to problems, in unexpected opportunities, in relief from distress, and in provision from places one cannot imagine. And when the remembrance is repeated consistently, it becomes like a shield that surrounds the believer with tranquility and protection, warding off harm and guiding them toward what is good. And the angels themselves are witnesses to these moments, surrounding the servant, recording their words and carrying their prayers to Allah. And the beauty of this remembrance before dawn is that it turns the ordinary into extraordinary, transforming a simple act of reciting or remembering into a doorway to mercy and fulfillment. And the one who embraces it will find that wishes placed in the hands of Allah at night are returned as blessings in the daylight. And every repetition of dhikr at this time is a testimony of trust, an admission of need, and an acknowledgement of Allah's greatness. And it is this combination of humility and sincerity that draws mercy in torrents, changing destinies and removing obstacles in unseen ways. And so, when one reflects on the power of nighttime remembrance, they will see it as an opportunity not just for forgiveness or spiritual growth, but as a key to every form of fulfillment they seek in this world and the next. Because the mercy that descends at night is not limited to spiritual matters, but extends to material, emotional, and personal needs, ensuring that the believer who turns to Allah in these hours is never deprived, for Allah has promised that He is close to those who call upon Him and answers the call of the caller when they call. And when that call is made before dawn, with a heart stripped of distractions, its acceptance is nearer than ever. And the mercy that follows transforms the life of the believer in ways they may not have even asked for, showing that nighttime remembrance is a treasure that contains within it the fulfillment of every wish and the descent of mercy that no one else can offer. Repetition with sincerity is not merely about uttering words again and again, but about allowing those words to penetrate the deepest chambers of the heart, to settle within the soul, and to transform into a living force that shapes one's destiny. Because when the believer repeats the names of Allah, verses of the Quran, or heartfelt supplications with unwavering sincerity, those words are no longer ordinary sounds, but keys that unlock the unseen treasures of provision, guidance, and divine assistance. And it is this sincerity that distinguishes empty ritual from powerful worship. For the tongue may move without the heart's presence, but true repetition is when every utterance is accompanied by a conscious recognition of who Allah is, a realization of one's need for Him, and an awareness that every provision comes only by His decree. And in that state, repetition becomes transformative, turning weakness into strength, scarcity into abundance, and despair into hope, because Allah responds not to lifeless words, but to the sincerity that fuels them. And when a person repeats with sincerity, the act itself becomes a testimony of faith, a declaration of reliance, and an acknowledgement that there is no power nor provision except through Allah. And this continuous remembrance strengthens faith by constantly reminding the soul of divine presence, reshaping thoughts and cleansing doubts, so that the believer begins to see life through the lens of tawakkul, placing trust in Allah above all else. And it is through this strengthened faith that doors of provision begin to open, because provision is not only money or material gain, but encompasses health, peace of mind, barakah in time, righteous companionship, opportunities for growth and protection from harm. And Allah has promised that whoever has taqwa, He will provide for them from sources they could never imagine. And repetition with sincerity nurtures taqwa in the heart, creating a state of constant awareness of Allah that draws His mercy and blessings. And history and experience both testify to this reality, as countless individuals have found that consistent, sincere remembrance has opened pathways for them that logic and effort alone could never have secured. Whether it is a student who found unexpected ease in learning after nightly recitation of Allah's names, a trader who saw barakah in his earnings despite limited means, or a family who found peace in their home after gathering to repeat words of dhikr. These are not coincidences, but manifestations of Allah's promise that those who turn to Him sincerely will never be left empty-handed. And even when the answer to their repetition does not come in the form they expect, it arrives in forms they did not know they needed, protecting them from calamities, guiding them away from harmful choices, and replacing what they desire with something better. And this itself is provision, because true risk is not only what enters one's hands, but also what enriches the heart, elevates the soul, and secures the path to eternal success. And repetition with sincerity cultivates patience, discipline, and consistency, qualities that strengthen faith by rooting it firmly in the heart so that trials do not shake it, temptations do not uproot it, and difficulties do not extinguish it. And when faith is strong, the believer sees doors of provision where others see walls of limitation, because their certainty in Allah's promise drives them to strive while trusting fully in His decree, and the angels bear witness to their sincerity, carrying their supplications to the heavens and surrounding them with divine protection, ensuring that their repetition is not in vain. And as they continue with sincerity, even in times when they feel unheard, they are in reality being raised in rank, purified of sins, and prepared for blessings greater than what they asked for. Because every sincere repetition plants seeds in the unseen, and those seeds eventually bear fruit in both this world and the next, reminding the believer that provision is never delayed without wisdom, nor granted without purpose. And the continuous cycle of repetition with sincerity becomes a shield against despair, a fuel for perseverance, and a magnet for divine generosity, showing that the one who clings to the remembrance of Allah sincerely and consistently will always find themselves surrounded by blessings that sustain their body, mind, and soul in ways they could never have planned for themselves. Aligning desires with Allah's will is the highest form of surrender that transforms a person's journey from chasing fleeting ambitions into seeking lasting fulfillment. Because when the heart beats in harmony with what Allah loves and approves of, every prayer carries weight, every supplication rises with purity, and every blessing that descends carries permanence and barakah rather than temporary satisfaction. And this alignment is not about silencing personal dreams or denying human needs, but about refining them, purifying them, and elevating them so they are no longer driven by ego, greed, or impatience, but by sincerity, gratitude, and the longing to please the Creator. And once a believer begins to align desires with Allah's will, they experience a transformation where prayers are no longer demands, but conversations with the one who knows what is best, and wishes are no longer desperate clutches at worldly gain, but hopeful calls for what will draw them closer to eternal success. And in this state, answered prayers no longer surprise the believer because they realize that Allah has always promised to respond, but the form of the response is tied to His wisdom and their own alignment. And this is why aligning desires is essential, because when one seeks wealth but asks it for the sake of arrogance or extravagance, the doors may remain closed. Yet when one seeks wealth with the intention of sustaining family, helping the needy, and living in gratitude, Allah opens doors in ways beyond imagination, and this applies to every aspect of life: marriage, health, knowledge, or opportunities, because Allah grants when the intention harmonizes with His wisdom, ensuring that blessings remain rather than turn into tests that destroy faith. And the Quran emphasizes that Allah does not burden a soul beyond its capacity, nor does He withhold except for a reason. So aligning desires with His will brings contentment even in delays, because the believer begins to see unanswered prayers not as rejection but as redirection towards something greater. And this shift in perspective strengthens faith, making a person resilient in trials and humble in times of ease, because their desires are no longer centered on what I want now, but on what Allah knows is best for me. And that surrender itself invites tranquility, because the heart is at rest when it no longer wrestles with disappointment or unmet expectations, and instead flows with trust in divine timing. And such alignment purifies the soul, for it removes envy when others are blessed, because the believer recognizes that everyone's risk is tailored by Allah. It removes arrogance when one succeeds, because they know success is a gift from Allah, and it removes despair in failure, because they understand every closed door carries hidden wisdom. And when this mindset grows, every blessing becomes lasting, because it is sought with sincerity, received with gratitude, and used in obedience. And Allah has promised that if we are grateful, He will increase us. So the believer who aligns desires with Allah's will never fears loss, because even if something is taken away, it is replaced with something better in this world or the next. And the sweetness of this truth is felt most in prayer, where aligned desires bring clarity and certainty, allowing the believer to pray not as one demanding from a distant power, but as a servant, humbly entrusting their heart to a Lord who is closer than their jugular vein. And the prayers of such a heart ascend untainted by arrogance or heedlessness, carried by angels, embraced by divine mercy, and answered in ways that illuminate both the seen and unseen realms. And in this way, aligning desires with Allah's will is not only the key to answered prayers, but the secret to lasting blessings, because blessings rooted in divine approval never fade, never corrupt, and never harm the one who receives them, but instead nourish their faith, elevate their soul, and draw them ever closer to the eternal reward that awaits beyond this temporary world.